I'm Fern, and for most of my life I was the kind of person who found comfort in the quiet hum of numbers. Growing up in Atlanta, just me and my dad in a small house with creaky floors, I learned early that stability was everything. My mom walked out when I was a kid, leaving my dad to juggle his business and raise me. He did his best, always pushing me to work hard, save smart, and keep my head down. By the time I hit my 30s, I was an accountant at a mid-sized firm, crunching numbers in a cubicle, my days blending into a predictable rhythm. Exciting? Hardly. The biggest thrill I'd had was when our office upgraded to new software, and even that felt like a stretch. But one evening everything shifted. My college friend Tessa dragged me to her birthday party at her place in Midtown. I stood in the corner of her packed living room, clutching a ginger ale, feeling like my dress was one size too small and my confidence even smaller. The music thumped so loud I could barely think, let alone make small talk. I was ready to slip out early when he walked over. Charles, he was tall, with a kind of easy confidence that made the room feel smaller. His dark hair felt just right, and his smile, it was the kind that could make you forget your own name. Hey, you're Fern, right? His voice cut through the bass like it was nothing. I nodded, gripping my drink tighter. Yeah, and you are Charles. He leaned against the wall next to me like he'd already decided we were friends. Mind if I hang out here? Not at all, I said, my voice barely audible over the pop song blasting through Tessa's speakers. I felt my cheeks heat up, but I tried to play it cool. So, Fern, what's your deal? Why were you hiding out in the corner? His tone was light, but his eyes locked onto mine like he actually cared about the answer. Just here for Tessa's birthday, I said, shrugging. She's hard to say no to. You know her? Work with her? He said, grinning. She's relentless with these invites. You're an accountant, right? She mentioned it. Laughed, surprised he knew. Yeah. Numbers are my thing. Not exactly glamorous. Sounds like you keep the world spinning, he said, and I couldn't tell if he was teasing or serious. Either way, it made me smile. Hardly. It's more like keeping spreadsheets from imploding. I sipped my drink, feeling a little bolder. What about you? What's your story? Just a guy looking for a good time, he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I do graphic design, but I'm stuck in a soul-sucking corporate gig. Not my dream, but it pays the bills. We kept talking, the noise fading into the background. He asked about my favorite books, dog-eared mysteries I'd read a dozen times, and shared his love for old sci-fi flicks. It was easy, like we'd known each other forever. When he suggested stepping outside for some air, I didn't hesitate. The backyard was a relief. The cool Atlanta night wrapping around us like a blanket. We sat on Tessa's rickety patio chairs, talking about everything and nothing. His hatred for his job, my secret talent for solving puzzles, the way Atlanta's skyline looked like it was holding its breath that night. As the party wounded down, Charles pulled out his phone. Can I get your number, Fern? I'd love to see you again. My heart did a little flip. I wasn't used to this. Guys like Charles didn't just walk into my life, but something about him felt right, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. Sure, I said, typing my number into his phone. His smile lit up the dark, and for the first time in a long time I felt like maybe my life was about to get a whole lot bigger. The days after that party felt like a dream I didn't want to wake up from. Charles texted me the next morning, and before I knew it, we were planning our first date. My nerves were a mess. I hadn't dated much, not since a couple of awkward setups in college that went nowhere. I stood in front of my closet, second-guessing every outfit. Finally, settling on a simple navy dress that felt safe but pretty. When Charles pulled up in his clean, unpretentious sedan, he flashed that same heart-topping smile from the party. "You look amazing, Fern," he said, and I blushed so hard I probably glowed. He took me to a little bistro indicator, the kind of place with warm lighting and the smell of fresh bread that made you feel at home. We ordered pasta, his with some fancy truffle sauce, mine with classic marinara, because I didn't want to mess up my dress. Over dinner he leaned in, twirling his fork like a pro. "So, Fern, tell me something nobody else knows about you." I laughed, poking at my food. "I'm not that interesting, but I can solve a Rubik's Cube in under a minute." His eyes lit up. "No way. That's legit cool. You got to show me some time." "Maybe I will," I said, starting to relax. "Your turn. Any secret talents?" "Make the best breakfast tacos you'll ever taste," he said, puffing out his chest playfully. "Challenge me sometime, and I'll prove it." "Deal," I teased. And just like that, the nerves melted away. We talked for hours about my love for order and numbers, his frustration with his graphic design job that felt more like pushing papers than creating art. It was like the world outside the bistro didn't exist. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Charles showed me parts of Atlanta I'd never explored. Hidden coffee shops in Little Five Points, a quiet park with a view of the skyline. We'd grab lunch near his office or meet after work. And every time I felt like I was seeing the city and myself through new eyes. I wasn't just the quiet accountant anymore. I was someone Charles really saw. And it made my heart ache in the best way. Things got serious fast. One weekend, Charles took me to meet his parents, Linda and Ron, at their cozy but slightly run-down house in a suburban pocket of Atlanta. Linda greeted me with a hug that nearly knocked the wind out of me. "Oh, Fern, we've heard so much about you," she said, her smile warm, but her eyes sharp like she was sizing me up. Ron shook my hand, his grip firm. "Good to meet you, Fern. Charles says you're a wizard with numbers." "It's not that exciting," I said, laughing. "Just keeping things organized." Dinner was loud and full of stories. Linda's love for gardening, Ron's endless tales about his old sales job. Charles kept glancing at me, his hand brushing mine under the table, and I felt like I belonged. A few weeks later, I brought Charles to meet my dad at his favorite diner. My dad, always busy with his small business, sized Charles up over coffee, but ended up smiling. "He's a good one, Fern," he told me later. "Hold on to him." That approval meant everything. One evening, we were walking through Piedmont Park, the Atlanta skyline glowing in the distance. Charles stopped suddenly, his hands in his pockets. "Fern, I've been thinking," he said, his voice softer than usual. My heart started racing. "I don't want to wait. I know it's fast. But will you marry me?" I froze, my breath catching. But looking into his eyes, I felt it. The certainty, the pull. "Yes, Charles," I said, my voice shaking. "Yes." Our wedding was small, just close friends and family at a venue near the Chattahoochee River. I felt like a different person in my simple white dress, my smile so wide it hurt. Tessa snapped photos and I posted them online, my heart bursting with joy. For the first time, I thought maybe this was it. The life I'd always wanted. The one my dad raised me to believe I could have. Life as newlyweds was supposed to be all bliss and late-night talks. But for Charles and me, it was more about unpacking boxes and dodging Atlanta traffic. We'd settled into a tiny apartment in Virginia Highland, cramped but ours. And I loved the little routines we were building. But one evening, as we sorted through wedding gifts, Charles dropped a bombshell. Hey, Fern, I've been thinking, he said, setting down a crystal vase from Tessa. What if we moved in with my parents? Froze, a mug in my hand. Live with Linda. And Ron like full-time. Yeah, he said, his eyes bright with an enthusiasm that felt forced. They're getting older, and I'd feel better being there to help. Plus it'd save us rent money. It made sense on paper. My dad had always drilled into me the importance of being practical, but the idea of living with my in-laws felt like stepping into a reality show I didn't sign up for. Are you sure they're okay with that? I asked, trying to hide my unease. Mom's been dropping him since we got engaged, Charles said, his voice reassuring. It'll be great. You'll see. A few weeks later we pulled up to Linda and Ron's house in a quiet Atlanta suburb, our lives stuffed into boxes in the back of a rented van. The house was charming in a dated way, with faded shutters and furniture that screamed 1970s. Linda was on the porch before we even parked, waving like we were celebrities. Fern, Charles, welcome, she called, pulling me into a hug that was a little too tight. Ron clapped Charles on the back. Good to have you home, son. You too, Fern. I forced a smile. Already missing our apartment's cozy chaos. The first few days were a blur of unpacking and adjusting. Linda was everywhere, popping into our room to offer towels or ask if we needed snacks. Just making sure you're settled, dear, she'd say, her smile bright, but her presence suffocating. I'd nod, biting back the urge to ask for space. One night at dinner, the air shifted. We were eating Linda's meatloaf, dry, but I didn't dare say so when Charles cleared his throat. So the house needs some work, he said, casual as if he were talking about the weather. The roof's leaking and the plumbing's a nightmare. I nearly choked on my potatoes. Work. Like repairs. Yeah, Ron said, his tone heavy. It's been a while since we could afford to fix things. Charles glanced at me, then away. I was thinking we could all pitch in. I took a pay cut at work, so I'm a bit tight right now. My stomach twisted. I just had my own hours cut at the firm, and our savings were already thin from the wedding. I'll see what I can do, I said, my voice tight, though inside I was screaming. Linda's eyes welled up. Oh, Fern, you're a godsend, she said, reaching for my hand. Ron nodded. Your family now, kid. Family. The word felt heavy, like a bill I didn't know I'd signed up to pay. The next few weeks were a haze of contractors, invoices, and my dwindling bank account. I wrote checks for roof, tiles, new pipes, anything to keep the house standing. Linda gushed about how gorgeous it looked while Ron slapped my shoulder like I was one of the guys. You're a lifesaver, Fern, he'd say. But every time I handed over another check, I felt less like a lifesaver and more like a bank. One night, after a long day of dealing with a pushy contractor, I collapsed onto our bed, exhausted. Charles sat beside me, his hand on mine. Thanks for all this, Fern, he said, his voice soft. It's for our future, right? I stared at the ceiling, the weight of his words pressing down. Right, I echoed, but my heart wasn't in it. As I lay there listening to the creak of the old house, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was pouring everything I had into someone else's dream. My dad's voice echoed in my head. Work hard. Stay smart. But I wondered if I'd been too trusting, too quick to say yes. Still, I was in too deep to turn back now. The house was starting to look like something out of a home magazine. All fresh paint and new fixtures. But the pride I felt was drowned out by the constant drain on my savings. I was trying to hold it together, telling myself it was for family, for Charles, when everything took a sharp turn. One evening, over a dinner of grilled chicken and green beans, Linda's usual Chatter fell silent. She exchanged a look with Ron, her eyes misty, and the air in the room grew thick. "We need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. Charles's fork paused midair and my stomach tightened. "What's going on?" asked, already dreading the answer. Ron cleared his throat. His usual bravado gone. "The house, it's got a mortgage, a big one. We owe $300,000, and the bank's breathing down our necks. If we don't pay it off soon, we could lose everything." My fork hit the plate with a clink. 300,000. I repeated, my voice sharp. "All the repairs I paid for, and you didn't think to mention this." Linda's tears spilled over. "We were ashamed, Fern. We thought we could handle it, but with the repairs, we're in over our heads." Charles wouldn't meet my eyes. "Maybe you could talk to your dad," he said quietly. "He's got the means, right? It's secure. The house for us, for our future." I felt like I'd been slapped. "My dad? You want me to ask him for that kind of money?" My voice rose and I didn't care. "He's been dealing with health issues. Charles, you know that." "Please, Vern." Linda sobbed, her hands clasped. "This is our home. We've lived here for decades." I was furious, trapped by their pleading faces. "I'll think about it," I muttered, pushing back from the table, my appetite gone. The next day I called my dad, my hands shaking as I explained. To my surprise, he didn't hesitate. "I'll help, Fern," he said, his voice steady despite his recent doctor visits. "But I want a formal agreement, receipts, everything documented. No loose ends." When I told Charles, he bristled. "Why is it got to be so formal? Can't he just trust us? It's $300,000, Charles." I snapped. "He's being careful and so am I." He muttered something about paperwork, but didn't push further. The money was transferred, the document signed, and Linda and Ron thanked me endlessly, their relief palpable. But something shifted between Charles and me, a coldness I couldn't ignore. Then the world broke apart. One afternoon, I got a call from my cousin. "Fern, it's your dad," she said, her voice breaking. "He had a heart attack. He didn't make it." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "No," I whispered, but the truth settled like a stone in my chest. Charles was there when I hung up, his face pale. "I'm so sorry, Fern," he said, pulling me into a hug. But his arms felt stiff, like he was going through the motions. Grief swallowed me whole as I planned the funeral. Each day, a blur of paperwork and condolences. One evening, exhausted, I came home earlier than expected. As I fumbled with my keys at the front door, I heard voices from the living room. Charles, sharp with frustration. "Can't keep this up," he was saying. "Living with her is exhausting. She's too much." Linda's voice was low, almost a hiss. "Just hold on, Charles. We need those receipts your father-in-law had. Fern's got them now. I'll grab them and burn them," Charles said, his tone cold as ice. "Then I'm done. I'm starting over. With that Aries I told you about. She's got real money." My blood ran cold. Stood frozen, the key still in the lock. As their words sink in, the family eyed, poured everything into my money. My heart was plotting against me. Charles didn't love me. He'd used me, and his parents were in on it. Rage and heartbreak churned inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I slammed the door loud enough to startle them, pretending I'd just arrived. "Hey, I'm back," I called, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "Oh, Fern," Linda said, her tone syrupy sweet. "How'd the funeral plans go?" "Fine," I said, forcing a smile as I caught their nervous glances. My skin crawled, but I Knew I had to play smart. They thought they'd won, but I wasn't going to let them destroy me. Not now. Not ever. The funeral was a haze of black dresses and whispered sympathies, but my grief was laced with something else. Anger. I kept replaying Charles's words, his parents scheming, the way they'd played me for a fool. Back at the house the air felt different, like the walls themselves knew the truth. We were sitting in the living room sipping coffee that had gone cold when Charles's mask finally fell. He looked at me, his usual charm replaced by a snare. Fern, you need to pack up and go, he said, his voice flat. I've found someone else. Someone better. The word should have cut deeper, but I was ready. Linda chimed in, her laugh sharp and cruel. We're done with you, dear. We only needed your money. Leaned back, my heart pounding but my face calm. What about the house? The one I fixed. The $300,000 I paid off. Ron chuckled like I told a joke. This is our house. Fern, you're nothing here. And those receipts you were so proud of, Charles added, smirking. Found them at your dad's place. Burned them. I let the silence hang, watching their smug faces. Then I laughed loud and sharp until their smiles wavered. What's so funny? Charles snapped. You're pathetic, I said, wiping a tear from my eye, still chuckling. You think you're clever? Those receipts you burned were copies. The originals are with my lawyer. The color drained from their faces. Charles's smirk vanished, replaced by panic. You're bluffing, he stammered. Try me, I said, my voice like steel. Want my money back? All of it or my next call is to the police. Ron tried to play peacemaker, his voice shaky. Fern, let's talk this out. We can figure something out, but I was done talking. Over the next few weeks, negotiations were a battle of wills. They tried every trick. Guilt, tears, even fake apologies, but I held firm. At their kitchen table, now legally mine, I laid out the terms. The house gets transferred to my name, or I press charges. No games. They caved. At the lawyer's office, the air was thick with tension as we signed the papers. Watched every pen stroke, ensuring no loopholes. When the house was officially mine, I slipped the documents into a folder and looked at Linda, who seemed smaller, deflated. These stay safe, I said, tapping the folder. No more stunts. The divorce was quick. Charles barely spoke, his arrogance gone. When it was done, I felt like I could breathe again. The day they moved out, I stood on the porch of my house, watching Charles, Linda, and Ron load their things into a beat-up van. Their faces were grim, their movements slow, and I felt a strange mix of triumph and sadness. This wasn't how I'd picture my marriage ending, but it was the only way forward. Word got around through friends. Charles's eyes dumped him weeks after the divorce, unwilling to deal with his baggage. Linda and Ron were stuck in a cramped apartment, a far cry from the house they'd schemed to keep. They tried calling, texting, even showing up with apologies, but I blocked them all. I was done being their pawn. One afternoon, as I sat in my quiet living room, a knock came at the door. Through the peephole I saw Charles, holding a sad bouquet of flowers. Opened the door, already laughing at the audacity. Really, Charles? Flowers? He shifted, looking smaller than I remembered. Fern, I messed up. I see that now. I want to make it right. Leaned against the door frame, my amusement fading to pity. Make it right. You're not here for me, Charles. You're here because your plan fell apart. But this life, I gesture to the house now, warm with my own touches. It's mine now, not yours. His face crumpled and he stepped back, the flowers drooping. Fern, please. We're done, I said, my voice firm. Don't come back. I closed the door, the click echoing like a full stop. Inside, the house was still. Sunlight spilling through the windows. Sank into my armchair, a book in my lap, and felt the peace I'd fought for. The walls, once heavy with lies, now held my story, one of betrayal, yes, but also of strength. I thought of my dad, his lessons about standing tall, and smiled. I'd lost so much, but I'd gained myself. The future was wide open. A blank page. I could write on my own terms. I sipped my tea, turned the page of my book, and let the quiet wrap around me. Whatever came next, I was ready. To everyone who's followed this journey, thank you. You've walked with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and the fight to take back what's mine. If this story hit you in the fields, hit that subscribe button and join me. Every corner of this house, every step I take tells a story of grit, grace, and starting over. Keep building your own path, and I'll see you in the next chapter.